welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to take a look at a hot topic, artificial intelligence, also known as AI for short. So, let's see how it's impacting our industry in terms of the very important aspect of PR writing. Whether it's a press release, a blog post, content, marketing materials, thought leadership pieces, speeches, you name it. Writing is a fundamental aspect and bread and butter at the heart of public relations. AI and the end of the human writer. The question is, if a computer can write like a person, what does that say about the nature of our own creativity? The most nauseating, addictive thing about writing is the uncertainty. And I don't mean the is anyone reading or will I make rent kind. The uncertainty I'm talking about dogs the very act. This business of writing an essay, for instance, which of 10,000 possible openings to choose, and how to ignore the sweaty tense that the unseen, unconceptualized 10,001st is the real keeper? Which threads to tug at without knowing where they lead, and which to leave alone? Which ideas to pick up along the way to fondle and polish and present to an unknown reader? How to know what sentence best comes next, or even what word? A shrewd observer will note that I'm complaining about the very essence of writing itself. But that has been the long-held privilege of writers, and they enjoyed it in the secure comfort of their uniqueness. Who else was going to do the writing, if not the writers who grouse about writing? Now along come these language engines with suspiciously casual or mythopoeic names like Chat GPT or Bard, which I believe is now known as Gemini, that suffer not an iota of writerly uncertainty. In what can only be called acts of emesis, they can pour out user manuals, short stories, college essays, sonnets, screenplays, propaganda, or op-eds within seconds of being requested for them. Already, as Naomi S. Barron points out in her book, Who Wrote This?, readers aren't always able to tell if a slab of text came out of a human torturing herself over syntax or a machine's frictionless innards. William Blake, it turns out, sounds human, but Gertrude Stein does not. This unsettles Barron, a linguist who has been writing about the fate of reading for decades now. And it appears to be no lasting consolation that, in some tests, people still correctly recognize an author as artificial. Inexorably, version after version, the AIs will improve. At some point, we must presume they will so thoroughly master Blakean, Scansion, and a chorus of other voices that their output, the mechanistic term is only appropriate, will feel indistinguishable from ours. Naturally, this perplexes us. If a computer can write like a person, what does that say about the nature of our own creativity? What, if anything, sets us apart? And if AI does indeed supplant human writing, what will humans, both readers and writers, lose? The stakes feel tremendous, dwarfing any previous wave of automation. Written expression changed us as a civilization. We recognize that so well that we use the invention of writing to democrate the past into prehistory and history. The erosion of writing promises to be equally momentous. In an abysmally simplified way, leaving out all mentions of vector spaces and transformer architecture, here's how a large language model, or LLM, works. Since the LLM hasn't been out on the streets to see cars halting at traffic signals, it cannot latch onto any experiential truth in the sentence. The BMW stopped at the traffic light. But it has been fed reams and reams of written material, 300 billion words in the case of ChatGPT 3.5, and trained to notice patterns. It has also been programmed to play a silent mathematical game, trying to predict the next word in a sentence of a source text, and either correcting or reinforcing its guesses as it progresses through the text. If the LLM plays the game long enough, over 300 billion or so words, it simulates something like understanding for itself. Even enough to determine that a BMW is a kind of car, that traffic light is a synonym for traffic signal, and that the sentence is more correct as far the real world goes. As far the real world goes, then the BMW danced at the traffic light, right? So the AI is being able to look at the sentence and tell which is more correct as far the real world goes, right? Than the BMW danced at the traffic light. Nuances. Using the same prediction algorithms, the LLM spits out plausible sentences of its own. The words or phrases or ideas chosen based on how frequently they occur near one another in its corpus. Everything is pattern matching. Everything, even poetry, is mathematics. Rhyming schemes, ones and twos, twos and threes, threes and fours, 1, 2, 3, 4. We still don't know precisely how humans grasp language, although it isn't the LLM way. No infant that I know of consumed 300 billion words before saying mama. But in his slim new book, Literary Theory for Robots, Dennis Yi Tenen, an associate professor of English at Columbia University in New York, proposes that the way we use language to create works bears some similarities to the machines. Thinking and writing happen through time, in dialogue with a crowd, Tenen maintains. Paradoxically, we create new art by imitating and riffing off each other. Subconsciously or otherwise, a writer milks inspiration out of libraries and conversations and draws in assistance from dictionaries, thesauruses, and style guides. We think with our bodies, with tools, with text, within environments, and with other people. A writer relies in less calculating fashion on the books she has ingested than an AI does, but they've made her into a writer all the same. It was always an error, Tenen writes, to imagine intelligence in a vat of private exceptional achievement, to buy into the fable of the writer in her lonely garret, manufacturing words and ideas de novo. In this notion of distributed intelligence, there is something both democratizing and destabilizing, a sneaky but egalitarian mode of murdering the author. Tenon insists, though, that we shouldn't, rather, agonize too much over the source of intelligence. Who cares if our thinking is closer to the synthesis of LLMs rather than the divinely ordained originality held dear by the Romantics, as long as we have an effect upon the world? Certainly not Aristotle. In the Aristotelian model, Tenon writes, intelligence is the goal of thought. The cap locks in the goal is written in caps. The caps locks there are Tenon's, not ours or Aristotle's. It's Plato who held intelligence to lie within the department of the interior, a private, nebulous thing that occasionally led to enlightenment. Pick your philosopher. Be our guest. Even at the summit of literary creation, fiction writers yielded to the seemingly inevitability of recombination. Tenon's potted history of authorial hacks, the richest section of his book, begins with Georges Polti, an enterprising Frenchman who in 1895 published a book called The 36 Dramatic Situations to help dramatists write new plays. Once you'd eliminated supplication, deliverance, vengeance, pursuit, disaster, revolt, and the other 30 symptoms of the human condition, he implied what else was left. Polti wasn't afraid to get specific. Among the subtypes of the pursuit situation were pursuit for fault of love and a pseudo madman struggling against an ego-like alienist. They will accuse me of killing imagination, Polti wrote, but in fact, his primer aspired to free playwrights from the pursuit of mere novelty, so they could devote themselves to truth and beauty. So, Mark Twain invented a self-going scrapbook for authors into which they might paste notes, newspaper snippets, and images for subsequent inspiration. His secrecy once filled 6 scrapbooks with clips about the Tichborne trial in London involving a no-name butcher who claimed the title to an English peerage. Twain concluded that the tale was too wild to be of use to a fiction artist, but it did form the basis of Zadie Smith's latest novel, The Fraud. Companies sold devices like the Chautauqua literary file and the Philips automatic plot file collector, into which writers stuffed their reference materials so that they could later pluck out a setting, a character, or a seed of a plot. It was ever thus, Tenon implies, the magpie approach to thinking, the collage as the modus operandi of writing. Why are we unnerved by LLMs following those same principles? So when I reached this juncture in literary theory for robots, I let out a silent, screaming plea for our species. The art of the novel doesn't lie in the combined harvesting of details and plot lines. Rather, it lies in how a writer selectively filters some of them through her own consciousness, her deliberations, the sum of her life, the din of her thoughts, to devise something altogether different and more profound. This, and only this, makes any piece of writing meaningful to those who read it. The AIs of the future may meet other yardsticks for creativity. They may say, grow aware of themselves as creators, satisfying the neurosurgeon Jeffrey Jefferson's dictum that a machine will equal the brain when it not only writes a sonnet, but also knows that it has written it. Consciousness. Their cogitations may seem as blurry and inscrutable as those of humans. Already, we are hard-pressed to say how precisely some hallucinations emerge from AIs. But they will never have experiences the way we have experiences. They can't lose a friend to suicide, or feel the pain of a twisted ankle, or delight at their first glimpse of the rolling Caucasus, or grow frustrated in a job, or become curious about Dutch art. Any text they furnish will be intrinsically hollow. They will fail to hold us like planets without gravity. But not very far into Barron's Who Wrote This, one starts to realize we're being defensive, that we are arguing for a special exemption for writing and language because we consider them such immutable aspects of the mind and of being human. So Barron, with the dry eyes of an actuary, sets about deromanticizing writing. She presents classifications of creativity ranging from the mini C, creativity of personal satisfaction, where you tweak the recipe of a peach cobbler at Thanksgiving, through the little C rung of winning a county fair ribbon for said recipe, up to the cobblerless pro C of professional creations like the Harry Potter series and the big C League of Shakespeare and Steve Jobs. Barron invokes these distinctions in part to understand human creativity. But she is particularly interested in whether AI imperils the big C. She points out that the high art of literary writing is merely a sliver of all writing turned out by humanity. Much of the rest is everyday writing by everyday people. And it includes grocery lists, birdwatching journals, emails, social media status updates, and office memos. Another subset Barron loves, her taxonomies, consists of writing for professional or financial gain. Here rest advertising copy, chemistry primers or primers, white papers, earnings reports, business case studies, texts to which we rarely look for deep meaning, big C creativity or personal connection. Not only will AIs be capable of producing these artifacts of writing, but a reader will feel no acute sense of loss in discovering where they came from. Tenon would note that even today, such texts already repurpose previous writing to a large extent. So to resent AIs for similarly relying on the work of others would be as fatuous as dismissing a novelist who employs a spell checker to correct his usage of who and whom. Both Tenon and Barron are cautious boosters of AI, saluting its potential to relieve us of many lesser forms of writing. But they also predict that more literally writing, big C writing, will resist the encroachments of the machines. It's simply that however effective or powerful a muscular artifice, for the sake of artifice isn't that intelligent or interesting to me, Tenon says. For truly human writing, an AI needs to gain a wider sense of the world, he adds. But it cannot, if words are all it has to go by. A machine cannot, well, as of yet, watch a film to review it. And it cannot, as also not yet, interview legislators who write a political feature. Anything that it produces in these genres must be confected out of reviews and interviews that have already been written. That lack of originality, Tenen would contend, will forever keep true creativity beyond the reach of AI. Still, we remain unsure. One might argue that it is always the audience that creates meaning out of a text, that a book is merely a jumble of words until it provokes responses in a reader, that the act of reading summons the book into being. In doing so, we wouldn't just be going back half a century to reader response theory and Roland Barthes' essay, The Death of the Author. More than a millennium ago, the Indian philosopher Bhatta Nayaka, in a literary treatise called Mirror of the Heart, reasoned that rasa, the Sanskrit notion of aesthetic flavor, resides not in the characters of a play, but in the reader or spectator. Rasa thus became entirely a matter of response. The Sanskrit scholar Sheldon Pollock wrote in A Rasa Reader, and the only remaining question was what precisely that response consists of. So, Bhatta Nayaka today, digesting the relationship between our AIs and us, would ask us an uncomfortable question. If, in a blind taste test, some readers are moved by a poem or a short story by ChatGPT, will we continue to prize their experience and hold their response to be more important than anything else? It's bound to happen at some point, and the computers don't even need to be sentient to get there. Alan Turing knew it. In his 1950 paper, when he proposed an inquiry into the question, can machines think? Turing swerved quickly into the question of whether machines could play the imitation game, whether they could merely fool human beings into concluding that they were thinking. The outcome, for all practical purposes, is the same. And the difference between moving us and fooling us isn't as great as we'd like to believe. So much for readers. But what of writers? The 20th century is cluttered with the vacated chairs and discarded uniforms of workers whose jobs have been automated. Human hands once stuffed sausages, riveted cars together, and transferred calls in telephone exchanges. Once again, it is tempting to claim an exemption for writing, because mind and language are special to us. We like to pretend that they are exempt from labor history, Tenen notes. But intellect requires artifice, and therefore labor. In the commercial sphere, a lot of writing is not so far removed from sausage making, and the machines have already begun to encroach. Realtors use ChatGPT to pump out listings of houses. The Associated Press turns to AI models to generate reports on corporate earnings. Context, a tool owned by LexisNexis, reads judicial decisions and then offers lawyers their most persuasive argument using the exact language and opinions your judge cites most frequently. When you consider that some judgments are now drafted by AIs as well, the legal profession seems to be on the cusp of machines debating each other to decide the fate of human beings. Think about that for a moment. Let that sink in. It won't do to be snobbish and describe these kinds of writing work as thankless, because they have occupied people who have been thankful for the income. Roughly 13% of American jobs are writing intensive, and they earn more than $675 billion a year. Many of these jobs are likely to evaporate, but when this is aired as a concern, the champions of automation have a standard lexicon of liberation, freed from the bondage of erudition. Today's scribes and scholars can challenge themselves with more creative tasks. Tenen writes. If he'd been speaking that sentence, perhaps he'd have ended it with an upward, hopeful lilt. Because little about the modern economy suggests that it wishes to support even the creative writers who already live within it, let alone the thousands on the verge of being emancipated by AI. However, there is supposedly freedom on offer for novelists and poets as well. In one of Barron's scenarios, AI tools provide the divine spark. Think of jump-starting a car battery. But cars start the same way every time, and they really just need to reach their destinations. For writers, trite as it sounds, it's about the origin and the journey. In the cautionary parable of Jennifer Lepp, as narrated by Barron, the writer is cold-shouldered out of her own writing. Lepp, a one-woman cottage industry turning out a new paranormal cozy mystery every 9 weeks, recruited an AI model called Sudowrite as an assistant. At first, Sudowrite helped her with brief descriptions, but gradually, as she let it do more and more, she no longer felt immersed in her characters and plots. She no longer dreamt about them, Barron writes. Lepp told The Verge, "It didn't feel like mine anymore. It was very uncomfortable to look back over what I wrote and not really feel connected to the words or the ideas." Here, at last, is the grisly crux, that AI threatens to ruin for many more of us than we might suppose. Not the benefits of reading, but those of writing. We don't all paint or make music, but we all formulate language in some way, and plenty of it is through writing. Even the most basic scraps of writing we do, lessons in cursive, text messages, marginal jottings, postcards, all that paltry offcuts of our minds improve us. Learning the correct spellings of words, according to many research studies, makes us better readers. Writing by hand impresses new information into the brain and sets off more ideas. According to several studies, they've proved that many times over and over again. Writing stuff helps you remember it. That's why we take notes in lectures, in class, in school, etc. And sustained writing of any kind, with chalk on a rock face, or a foot-long novelty pencil, or indeed a laptop, abates contemplation. An entire half-page of Barron's book is filled with variations of this single sentiment, ranging from Horace Walpole's "I never understand anything until I have written about it," to Joan Didion's "I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking, what I'm looking at, what I see, and what it means." Sometimes even that is prologue. We also write to reach out, to convey the squalls and scuffles in our souls, so that others may see us better and see themselves through us. The difficulty of writing, the cursed, nerve-shredding, fingernail-yanking uncertainty of it, is what forces the discovery of anything that is meaningful to writers or to their readers. So, to have AI strip all that away would be to render us wordless, thoughtless, selfless. Give me the shredded nerves and yanked fingernails any day. That brings us to a close for this episode. We hope you really liked it. The discussion will continue as we embrace AI and figure out its best uses and how it can alleviate our lives so we can focus on more difficult tasks and less mundane, stressful writing. But we'll keep on this topic and keep updating you as we find out new information or interesting tidbits that relate to PR, media, marketing, etc. Thanks for stopping by. Please head over to buymeacoffee.com/Samson King. Support us there. Like the channel so we know you like this content and can give you more of this good stuff. Please subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.